My best friend showed my fiancé my private journal to sabotage our wedding, calling me unstable and ending everything, just as she'd hoped. What they didn't know is that I had already sensed their betrayal and made her the sole financial contact for every single non-refundable vendor contract. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The air in our apartment felt thin, stripped of its usual comfort. For weeks, it had been a chaotic wonderland of satin ribbon samples, seating chart drafts, and the sweet, papery scent of invitation stationery. Now, it just felt like a room. The silence was the worst part. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket where excited chatter used to be. I was sitting on the edge of the sofa, a spreadsheet of final payment due dates glowing on my laptop screen, when Liam walked in. He didn't look at me. His eyes, which I had always considered to be the kindest shade of blue, were as flat and cold as a winter sky. He placed my journal on the coffee table between us. It wasn't tossed or slammed, but set down with a quiet finality that made my stomach clench. It was my private refuge, a simple leather-bound book filled with the messy, unfiltered scribble of my innermost thoughts, and it was open. "I've been reading this," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. It was the voice he used for business calls, the one that negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with unnerving calm. I'd always found it impressive. Now, it just felt alien. My gaze flickered past him to where Olivia, my best friend and maid of honor, stood hovering by the doorway. She had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a theatrical display of horror. "Liam, don't," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is a mistake." A mistake, that was one word for it. A betrayal was another. "I need to understand who I was about to marry," Liam continued, his eyes finally locking onto mine. They held no warmth, no confusion, only a chillingly clear judgment. Because it certainly wasn't the woman who wrote these things. He tapped a manicured finger on the open page. I knew exactly which entry he was pointing to. It was from a night 3 weeks ago, a night I was drowning in stress, convinced that every tiny detail of the wedding was destined to go wrong. I had vented about everything: the caterer, my mother's unsolicited opinions, and yes, a fleeting, ridiculous fear that Liam and I were too different. I'd called it pre-wedding panic in the very next sentence, but I knew he wouldn't have read that part. "Sometimes I wonder if he even sees the real me or just the version he wants to see," he quoted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Am I losing myself in all this?" He shook his head slowly. "You wrote that you felt trapped. You questioned my commitment, my family, everything." He paused, letting the weight of my own words crush me. "I can't marry someone who is so fundamentally unsure. I can't build a life with someone who is so unstable." Unstable. The word hung in the air, a poison dart. It was the word he and Olivia had chosen. It was clinical, dismissive, and utterly devastating. I looked from Liam's hard, unforgiving face to Olivia's performance of distress. She was the one who had given me the journal for my birthday last year, telling me it was a safe space to let the crazy out. It seemed she had always intended to be the one to open the door and show it to the world. My throat was tight, but my mind was surprisingly, terrifyingly clear. All the swirling anxieties and fears I'd poured into that book suddenly solidified into a single, cold certainty. The meticulously planned future I had been working toward for over a year, the venue deposit, the dress fittings, the life I thought I was building, was dissolving in real time. But as I looked at the two of them, standing together on the other side of an invisible line they had just drawn, I realized the wedding wasn't the only thing that was a lie. The betrayal wasn't in the words he read. It was in the two faces I was looking at. In the movies, this is the part where the woman breaks down. There are gut-wrenching sobs, hurled accusations, maybe a satisfyingly dramatic slap. I did none of those things. A strange, glacial calm settled over me, a sort of emotional self-preservation that was so absolute it felt like a physical shield. My mind, the same mind that organized $100,000 corporate galas without breaking a sweat, simply switched from bride mode to damage control mode. I closed my laptop, the click of the lid echoing in the silent room. "Okay," I said. The single word seemed to throw both of them. They had been braced for a storm, and my quiet acceptance left them without a script. Liam's jaw tightened. Olivia's feigned sympathy faltered. Aired, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "Okay," Liam repeated, a note of frustration in his voice. "That's all you have to say. I just called off our wedding, Blake." "I heard you," I replied, my voice even. "You said I was unstable. You said you can't marry me. There's not much ambiguity there." I stood up and walked toward our bedroom, the one that was still littered with tissue paper from a shower gift Olivia had given me just last weekend. She followed me, her voice a syrupy whisper. "Blake, please don't shut down. I'm so sorry. I had no idea he would react like this. I just saw the journal on your desk, I read a page, and I got so worried about you. I thought he should know you were struggling." I stopped in the doorway and turned to look at her. Her brow was furrowed with concern, her eyes shining with unshed tears. It was a masterful performance. She had always been a good actress. I remembered all the times she'd played the supportive friend, the enthusiastic maid of honor, helping me choose floral arrangements and tasting wedding cakes, all while hiding this viper in her heart. "You were worried about me," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "Thank you for your concern, Olivia. It's been noted." I went into the bedroom and pulled my largest suitcase from the top of the closet. I didn't bother with the designer clothes or sentimental trinkets. I packed the essentials: work documents, my laptop, my passport, the sturdy, sensible shoes I wore on event days. Practical things. Things that belonged only to me. Liam appeared at the door, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He had shed the cold businessman persona and was now attempting a softer, more reasonable tone. It was the voice he used when a deal was going south and he needed to placate the other party. "Look, Blake, this doesn't have to be so dramatic," he said. "Maybe we just need some time, a postponement. We can go to counseling. You can work through these issues." He was quoting my journal again. The entry where I'd wondered aloud if all couples should have premarital counseling to learn better communication skills. He was twisting my own thoughtful introspection into a diagnosis of my brokenness. I paused from folding a sweater and looked at him. "You don't get to break me and then offer to fix me, Liam. You made your decision based on stolen words and a performance from the woman standing behind you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was quiet, but it was solid. As I zipped the suitcase, a single, recurring thought echoed in the calm, quiet space of my mind. It was a comforting hum beneath the roaring silence of my shattered life. They thought they had all the power. They thought they had exposed me, broken me, and were now in control of the narrative. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who I was and what I did for a living. My entire career was built on foresight. As a corporate event planner, I lived and breathed contingency plans. What if the keynote speaker misses their flight? What if the caterer's oven fails? What if a freak thunderstorm knocks out the power? I had a plan for the plan. My job was to anticipate disaster and neutralize it before anyone even knew it was a possibility. It's why I was so good at it. It's why I was paid so well. I managed chaos for a living. I had applied that same meticulousness to our wedding. For over a year, I had been the sole architect of the entire event. Liam, a financial analyst who saw everything as numbers on a spreadsheet, had been impressed by my efficiency. "It's incredible, Blake," he'd said just a few months ago, looking over my color-coded binder of vendor contracts. "You're like a machine. I don't know what I'd do without you." At the time, I deglowed with pride. Now, the memory felt bitter. He hadn't loved my competence. He'd simply enjoyed the benefits of it. He loved that I made his life easy. And Olivia, I had given so much of myself to that friendship. When she was struggling to find a job after college, I'd spent weeks rewriting her resume and coaching her through interviews, eventually calling in a favor to get her the position at the law firm. When she went through a bad breakup, she lived on my sofa for a month, and I was the one who screened her ex's frantic calls and reminded her of her own worth. I was her rock, her confidant, her biggest cheerleader. I should have seen the jealousy earlier. It was there, in subtle, cutting remarks disguised as jokes. When Liam proposed with my grandmother's ring, a beautiful, simple diamond I'd always cherished, Olivia had said, "Wow, you trained him well. I'm still trying to get my guy to buy me a decent dinner." When I found my dream wedding dress, she'd remarked, "It's gorgeous. A little traditional for you, isn't it?" Every compliment came with a tiny pinprick, a subtle attempt to deflate my happiness. She had a polished, almost brittle appearance. Her clothes were always immaculate, her makeup perfect, but there was a hunger in her eyes that I had willfully ignored. She was particularly interested in the financial aspects of the wedding. "That venue must have cost a fortune," she'd say, her tone a little too sharp. "Are Liam's parents helping? They have so much money." She was obsessed with the idea of the life Liam could provide, a life she clearly felt she deserved more than I did. She saw him not as a partner, but as an acquisition. Liam, for his part, was a man who craved a life that looked perfect from the outside. He loved the idea of a beautiful wife, a prestigious job, and a flawlessly executed wedding that would impress his colleagues and family. He didn't handle emotional messiness well. Anytime I had tried to express my own fears or insecurities in the past, he would grow quiet, uncomfortable. He'd offer a platitude, "Don't worry, it will all be fine," and change the subject. He didn't want a real partner with complex feelings. He wanted a project manager for his personal life. My journal wasn't a window into my soul for him. It was a project that had suddenly revealed a catastrophic, unforeseen complication. And his solution was simple: liquidate the asset. He and Olivia were two sides of the same coin. People who saw relationships as transactions. They evaluated people based on their utility. And in their cold, calculating assessment, I had just become a liability. The turning point hadn't happened in the moments after the confrontation. It had happened a week before, on a quiet Tuesday evening. I had come home early from a site visit, my mind buzzing with floral arrangements and seating charts. I walked into the apartment to find Olivia and Liam standing in the kitchen. There was no music playing, no television on. They were just standing close together, talking in low voices. As I watched from the hallway unseen, Olivia reached out and brushed something off Liam's collar. It was a gesture that was, on its surface, completely innocent. But the way she did it, the way her fingers lingered on his shoulder for a fraction of a second too long, was proprietorial. And Liam didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch just slightly and gave her a look. It wasn't a look of lust or overt passion. It was something far more dangerous, a look of quiet conspiracy. It was the look of two people who shared a secret. In that instant, a cold, hard knot of dread formed in my stomach. It wasn't a logical conclusion. It was a primal, intuitive alarm bell. My meticulously planned future suddenly felt like it was built on a fault line. I didn't know what the secret was, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that it involved me. And I knew I needed a contingency plan. The next afternoon, I blocked off 3 hours on my work calendar and sat down at my desk with the wedding binder. I had negotiated every one of these contracts myself. I knew them inside and out, every clause, every deadline, every penalty. I opened my contacts list and started making calls. My first call was to the venue, a historic manor house with sprawling gardens. It was our biggest expense, with a non-refundable deposit and a staggering 80% cancellation fee if the event was called off within 30 days of the date. We were 28 days out. "Hi, Margaret, it's Blake," I said, my voice bright and professional. "I hope you're having a great day. I have a small administrative update for our file." "Of course, Blake. What can I do for you?" "My maid of honor, Olivia, is going to be handling all the final on-site logistics and vendor payments from here on out. It's just easier to have one point person for the home stretch. You know how it is. Could we please update the primary contact and financially responsible party on the agreement to her? I'll send over a signed addendum right now." There was a pause, but not of suspicion. "Oh, what a great maid of honor. That will certainly streamline things. Not a problem. Just send it over and I'll get it processed." I was an industry professional. They had no reason to question me. A planner updating a contact was routine. I had a pre-written email with the addendum ready to go. I attached the PDF, hit send, and moved on to the next call. The caterer, the band, the photographer, the florist. One by one, I called them all. I used the same calm, professional script. The story was plausible, my tone unwavering. With each call, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were managing a crisis for a client, not dismantling my own life. I was methodically and legally transferring the entire financial liability of my wedding, a sum totaling just over $75,000, directly to Olivia. I updated her home address, her email, and her phone number on every single document. By the time I was done, my name was still on the invitation, but it was nowhere to be found on the invoices. I closed the binder and put it away. I didn't know if I would ever need this contingency plan. I hoped I wouldn't. But as I sat there in the quiet of my office, I knew I had just built myself a lifeboat. I had no idea how soon I would need it. With my one suitcase packed and standing by the door, I walked back out into the living room. The air was thick with their anticipation. They were waiting for the tears, the screaming, the pleading. They were waiting for me to fall apart so they could play their respective roles of concerned friend and reluctant executioner. I was about to rob them of the satisfaction. I picked up my purse and my car keys from the small table by the door. I didn't look at the journal, still lying open on the table like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. It didn't matter anymore. It was just paper and ink. The real story was standing right in front of me. Liam spoke first, his voice tight. "So that's it, you're just leaving, after everything." "It seems to be what you want," I said, finally looking at him. I made sure my expression was neutral, my voice calm. "You don't want to marry someone unstable. I am respecting your decision." My composure was clearly unnerving him. This wasn't part of his plan. He had expected a messy, emotional battle that would justify his position, that would prove how volatile I was. My calm was dismantling his narrative piece by piece. "Blake, this is ridiculous," he snapped, his frustration finally boiling over. "You're being cold. This is exactly what I'm talking about." "No," I said, my voice dropping slightly, carrying a new weight. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. This is what happens when you push someone to their absolute limit. You don't get a storm. You get quiet. You get clarity." My eyes then shifted to Olivia. She was watching me with a look of intense, predatory focus, trying to gauge my next move. Her performance of the weeping friend had vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of a victor who was waiting for the official surrender. I decided to give her a victory she wasn't expecting. I gave her a small, sad smile. It wasn't sarcastic or malicious. It was a smile of genuine, heartbreaking pity. "I hope you two will be very happy," I said. The words landed in the silent room with the force of a physical blow. Olivia's eyes widened and a faint blush crept up her neck. Liam flinched as if I'd struck him. It was a simple phrase, one filled with devastating implication. It wasn't an accusation, it was a blessing. A curse disguised as a benediction. I had acknowledged their secret without ever having to name it. Olivia stammered, her voice suddenly high and reedy. "Blake, what are you talking about? Why would you say that?" Liam just stared at me, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. He was a numbers guy, a man who dealt in facts and figures. He wasn't equipped for this kind of emotional warfare. He had expected hysterics, and I had given him strategy. I didn't answer her, I didn't need to, I just held her gaze for a moment longer. "You wanted this," I said softly, my words meant only for her. "You got it, all of it." Then I turned, opened the door, and walked out of the apartment and my old life without a single look back. I left them standing there together in the wreckage they had created, surrounded by satin ribbons and seating charts and the deafening silence of my absence. They thought they had won. They had no idea the battle was just beginning. I drove to my parents' house in a daze, the world outside my car windows feeling blurry and unreal. I spent the first 2 days in a state of suspended animation, moving through the motions of life, eating when my mom put food in front of me, sleeping when exhaustion finally claimed me, but feeling nothing. The glacial calm that had protected me during the initial confrontation remained. It was a shield, and I was grateful for it. I knew that eventually, the grief and the rage would come, but for now, the quiet was a mercy. I ignored the dozens of texts and missed calls from mutual friends. I didn't check social media. I was in a self-imposed exile, creating a clean break. I knew Liam and Olivia would be crafting their own version of events, painting me as the unstable, runaway bride. Let them. Their narrative was about to be hit by a tidal wave of reality. The first tremor hit on Friday, 3 days after I left. My mother handed me the phone. "It's someone named Margaret, dear, from that manor house." I took the phone. "Hi, Margaret, this is Blake." "Blake, thank goodness. Listen, I am so sorry to bother you, but I've been trying to reach your maid of honor, Olivia, for 2 days now, and she isn't responding to my emails or calls. We received a frantic voicemail from Liam, yesterday about canceling the wedding, and per the contract, we need to speak with the financially responsible party to process everything and collect the cancellation fee." I feigned surprise. "Oh dear, she's not responding? That's not like her. I'm sure she's just overwhelmed with everything. How much is the cancellation fee again?" As the cancellation is within the 30-day window, it's 80% of the total booking fee. "The final invoice is for $40,000, Margaret said, her voice full of professional sympathy. "40,000, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air. "Well, I'm sure she'll get back to you soon. Thanks for letting me know." I hung up and allowed myself a small, grim smile. The first invoice had been sent. The clock was ticking. The full eruption happened on Sunday evening. I heard a car screech to a halt in the driveway, followed by frantic, angry knocking on the front door. My dad, a man of few words and a perpetually calm demeanor, opened it to find Liam and Olivia standing on the porch, their faces pale and furious. "We need to speak to Blake," Liam demanded, trying to push past my father. "You'll speak to her respectfully, or you'll speak to her from my lawn," my dad said, not moving an inch. I appeared in the hallway behind him. "It's okay, Dad, let them in." They stormed into the living room. Olivia was clutching her phone like it was a live grenade. She was no longer the poised, polished woman from my apartment. Her hair was a mess, her eyes wild with panic. "What did you do, Blake?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What did you do? The venue sent me a bill for $40,000. The caterer just emailed me an invoice for $20,000. The band, the photographer, they're all calling me. They say I'm responsible." Liam, the ever-composed financial analyst, looked like he was about to be physically ill. He was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. "This is insane. It has to be a mistake. We have to call them, tell them there's been a misunderstanding." I walked over to the bookshelf where I'd left my wedding binder. I pulled it out, opened it on the coffee table, and turned it to face them. I had already printed out the addendums and highlighted the relevant sections. "There's no mistake," I said calmly. "It's all right here." I tapped the first page, the contract for the venue. "This is Addendum C, signed and executed last Tuesday. It legally transfers the primary contact and financial responsibility for this contract to Olivia. Her name, her address, her phone number." I flipped the page. "And this is the one for the caterer, and the florist, and the band." Olivia stared at the pages, her face ashen. As an administrative assistant at a law firm, she understood the grim finality of the signed documents in front of her. She knew what a legally binding contract looked like. Liam leaned over, his eyes scanning the documents. The color drained from his face as he saw the signatures, the dates, the cold, hard numbers. He looked from the papers to me, and for the first time, he seemed to see the woman he had so casually dismissed. The meticulous, organized, and utterly ruthless planner he had taken for granted. He slowly turned his head to look at Olivia. The bond of their secret alliance, the one forged in whispers and stolen moments, evaporated in an instant, consumed by the terrifying reality of a $75,000 debt. "You told me this would be clean," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. You told me she would be a mess. You said you could handle her. Olivia flinched, staring at him with betrayed eyes. I didn't know, she stammered. How could I know she would do this? Because you underestimated her, he roared, his voice echoing in the quiet suburban house. We both did. 2 weeks later, the final showdown did not take place in a screaming match or a public venue. It took place in the sterile, beige conference room of my lawyer's office. I had hired the best family law attorney in the city, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, whose hourly rate was its own form of intimidation. At her advice, we had summoned Olivia and Liam to a formal meeting to discuss a resolution to the outstanding contractual obligations. Olivia arrived first, alone. She had attempted to restore her usual polished facade, but the strain showed around her eyes. She carried a leather portfolio, a desperate attempt to project a professionalism she no longer felt. She believed, having worked at a law firm, that she could navigate this herself. It was a fatal miscalculation. Liam arrived 5 minutes later, accompanied by his own lawyer, a grim-faced man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Liam refused to even look at Olivia, taking a seat on the opposite side of the long, mahogany table. The battle lines were drawn. Ms. Albright began, her voice calm and methodical. She laid out the facts without emotion, presenting each signed contract and its corresponding addendum. She had created a summary sheet, a single page that detailed each vendor, the cancellation clause, and the amount owed, with the grand total at T. He bottom circled in red ink, $75,820. As you can see, Ms. Albright stated, the contracts are ironclad. The addendums were legally executed and submitted. The vendors have a right to collect these fees, and they have informed us they fully intend to do so. Ms. Blake's name has been cleared of all liability. The responsibility rests entirely with Ms. Olivia. Olivia's lawyer-for-a-day bravado crumbled. This is entrapment, she cried, her voice rising. She set me up. She did this out of malice. Ms. Albright raised an eyebrow. Malice? My client simply updated the contact information to her designated maid of honor, the person she entrusted with handling the final details of her wedding. Are you saying you weren't planning on performing those duties? Furthermore, the timing is interesting. My client made these changes before her journal was stolen and her engagement was terminated. If anything, it seems like an act of incredible foresight, not malice. It's as if she sensed a betrayal was imminent. Liam's lawyer cleared his throat. My client was not aware of these contractual changes. He is a victim in this as well. A victim? I spoke for the first time, my voice quiet but firm. He was a co-conspirator. He used my private thoughts, my deepest anxieties that I shared in confidence, as a weapon to end our engagement in the most cruel way possible, all to avoid looking like the bad guy. You have no proof of that, Olivia shot back. Ms. Albright slid a thin file across the table. Actually, we do have proof of motive. She opened the file to reveal a stack of printed screenshots. These are text messages between you, Olivia, and a mutual friend, Sarah. In them, you speak at length about your feelings for Liam. You mention, and I quote, I just wish Blake was out of the picture. He deserves someone who really gets him. And my personal favorite. Once this wedding is over, maybe he'll see who's been here for him all along. Olivia's face went white. She had forgotten about Sarah, another friend she had tried to turn against me, who had instead forwarded everything straight to me with a simple message. I think you need to see this. The texts were the final, devastating blow. They might not have been proof of the journal plot, but they were irrefutable proof of her long-standing intent to sabotage my relationship. That was all it took for Liam. He saw his perfect, blameless narrative being shredded before his eyes. The financial analyst in him took over, calculating the potential for reputational damage and legal fees. He immediately went into self-preservation mode. This was her, he said, pointing a trembling finger at Olivia. It was all her idea. She was the one who found the journal. She pushed me, she manipulated me. She told me Blake was having doubts that I needed to end it before she did. She's been obsessed with me for years. He threw her under the bus with such speed and ferocity it was stunning. He offered, through his lawyer, to pay a third of the fees, a good faith gesture to the vendors, in exchange for a signed document from me stating he was misled by Olivia. Olivia just sat there, utterly broken. The man she had schemed for, betrayed her best friend for, was now disavowing her in a lawyer's office to save himself $25,000. She stared at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock and dawning, agonizing clarity. Their great love story, the one she had imagined for herself, had just been exposed for what it was. A cheap, pathetic alliance of jealousy and cowardice. And it had just cost her everything. The fallout was swift and brutal. The vendors, armed with legally sound contracts and the name of a single, liable individual, directed their legal teams at Olivia with the ruthless efficiency of sharks. Faced with a debt she could never hope to repay and abandoned by Liam, she was forced to file for bankruptcy within 6 months. The process stripped her of her assets, her pride, and the polished image she had worked so hard to maintain. Her law firm, upon learning of her conduct and the impending legal troubles, quietly terminated her employment, citing a breach of professional ethics. She was ruined, financially and socially. Liam paid his good faith gesture and tried to salvage his reputation. He spread a story about being the victim of a manipulative, obsessed woman. A few people believed him, but most of our mutual friends had seen the text messages. They had seen his cruelty and cowardice firsthand. His social circle shrank, and the perfect life he so desperately wanted to project was permanently tainted by scandal. The last I heard, he had transferred to his firm's office in another state, a quiet admission of defeat. For me, the aftermath was quiet. I took the money from selling my engagement ring and my half of the apartment's furniture and bought a plane ticket. I spent a month traveling alone, hiking in mountains, reading books in sea. Aside cafes, and slowly, piece by piece, reclaiming the parts of myself I had lost. I didn't need a new relationship to feel whole. I needed to reconnect with the strong, capable woman who had been there all along. The true healing came in small, unexpected moments. It came from my parents' unwavering support, from old friends who reached out not with pity, but with admiration. The most surprising moment came from a phone call a few months after I returned. It was the leader of the wedding band. "Hey, Blake," he said. "It's Tom. Listen, our lawyer told us the whole situation was settled. I just wanted to call and say I've been in this business for 20 years. I've seen some wild stuff. But I have never seen anyone handle a crisis with that much class and precision. It was the most professional takedown I've ever witnessed." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "Thanks, Tom, I'm a planner. I just made a contingency plan." That night, I sat down and finally opened my journal again. I turned to a fresh, empty page. I thought about filling it with the anger and the pain of the past few months, but I found I didn't need to anymore. The story was over. They were no longer a part of my narrative. I took out my phone and scrolled to Olivia's name. I pressed delete contact. Then I found Liam S. Delete. It wasn't a grand, dramatic gesture. It was a quiet, final act of closure. With 2 simple taps, I had removed the last remnants of their weight from my life. I was free. The future was an unwritten page, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to be the one holding the pen.